I didn't recognize my own son's voice that morning. Not the tone, not the calmness, not the strange mixture of pity and calculation hiding beneath his words. It was the kind of voice people use with strangers they've already decided something about. Your weakness, your future, your place in their plans. "Mom, you don't need a lawyer." That's what he said. Softly, carefully, as if the sentence were a fragile thing that might break if he spoke too loudly. But it was me who broke inside. The steam from my tea rose quietly between us. The cup shook slightly in my hands, not from age but from knowing. A knowing that pressed cold fingers against the back of my neck. A knowing that whispered, "You are not imagining this. Something is being taken from you." Outside, the morning sun stretched across my kitchen floor, drawing long pale lines over the wooden planks. My late husband used to joke that our home breathed with us. But that morning it felt like the house was holding its breath. I studied my son's face. The softness around his eyes was gone, replaced with something practiced, something almost rehearsed. And standing behind him, near the doorway, was Clara, arms folded, perfume thick enough to arrive in the room before she did. Her smile was a thin little slice of courtesy stretched over irritation. The folder was tucked neatly under my son's arm, thick, official-looking, the kind of folder people carry when decisions have already been made. He placed it on my table without asking. The sound it made, a dull thud, felt like a small betrayal. I didn't touch it. Not yet. "What is this about?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. It's strange how truth sometimes announces itself long before it speaks. Stuart pulled out the chair beside mine. He didn't sit. He hovered, half son, half stranger. "Mom, this house is getting too much for you," he began, using the same tone people use when telling a child not to play near the street. "And finances at your age can get complicated. We just want to help." At my age. That phrase slid across the table like a cold shadow. I looked down at my hands, hands that raised him, hands that buried my husband, hands that kept this home running long after grief tried to quiet it. Their voices drifted around me, saying more words I didn't hear. My heart was too loud, my memory too sharp, my instincts too awake. Because beneath the practiced smiles, beneath the softened voices, beneath the careful concern, they had already decided what they wanted. They didn't know something, though. Not yet. They didn't know I had already made a decision of my own. Behind the closed drawer in my bedroom lay a card with a name written neatly across it. My lawyer. Or rather, my lawyers. And the moment would come, sooner than they thought, when they would realize just how much I knew, and how long I had been silent. But what led a 74-year-old mother to call 2 lawyers before her own son walked through her door? And what exactly was inside the folder he placed on her table that morning? The truth begins long before this moment. People think betrayal begins with a single moment, one sentence, one decision, one paper dropped onto a kitchen table. But the truth is softer, slower, and far more painful. Betrayal begins with little things you try to ignore. A forgotten phone call, a tightened smile, a change in someone's eyes when they look at you. It starts long before you ever notice it. For me, the beginning was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, months before the folder appeared in my son's hands. Back then, the house still felt warm, alive, filled with the after echo of my husband's laughter, the familiar weight of his books on the shelves, the dent in the cushion where he used to sit. Grief softens after a while like an old bruise. You can forget it's there until you bump into it. Stuart used to visit often after his father passed. He'd bring groceries, repair a loose handle, sit with me in the evenings. Not out of duty but because he wanted to. Or at least that's what I believed at the time. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things changed. The first shift came when he stopped calling me Mom with warmth. The word began landing flat, as if spoken from a room away. Then came the second shift, Clara. She wasn't cruel. Not openly. But her kindness always had edges. Every compliment arrived with a tiny sting hidden beneath it. "That's a lovely sweater, Mrs. Hale, so classic. You must have had it for years." Little remarks, little cuts. And then one day, while I poured tea for her in my kitchen, she said, "You know, managing a house this size must be exhausting at your age." There it was again. At your age. The phrase that makes you feel like you've stepped out of your own life and into a waiting room for the forgotten. I laughed it off at first. But that night, when I lay in bed, Her words replayed themselves softly in my mind. Not for what she said, but for how she said it, as if she wasn't offering concern but planting an idea. After that, they stopped visiting as often. Calls became shorter, conversations more formal, and the warmth between us, something I had once taken for granted, began to thin like fabric worn too many times. One evening, I overheard them whispering on my porch. My hearing isn't what it used to be, but grief sharpened some senses. My name floated through the air, followed by phrases I couldn't fully catch. Too big for her. Confusing finances. What if something happens? Their silhouettes stretched long across the porch light, two figures discussing a future they hadn't invited me into. That night, for the first time in my life, I locked my bedroom door. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. I knew something was shifting beneath the surface, like the faint tremor before an earthquake. And when I found the letter addressed to me, one sent by the bank, mistakenly forwarded to Stuart's home before he returned it unopened, I realized the tremor wasn't accidental. Someone had already started moving pieces. Quietly, carefully, and without me. It was then I understood. I needed help, not from my son, but from someone who still saw me as capable. And that's when I made the first call. Not one lawyer. Two. Because something told me that the storm approaching would be bigger than I imagined. But what exactly did the bank letter reveal? And why did it force a mother to seek legal protection against her own child months before anything happened? The truth begins to take shape in the next part. The letter was thin, too thin to be anything meaningful, I thought at first. Just a single sheet of paper inside a crisp white envelope, the kind that feels cold even after sitting in your hands. It was tucked beneath a stack of grocery coupons someone had left on my porch table. Had Stuart placed it there without realizing? Or had Clara slipped it under the other mail, hoping I wouldn't notice? I'll never know for certain. But I do know one thing. That letter was never supposed to reach me. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, glasses perched low on my nose, the late afternoon sun stretching across the wood like a soft blanket. I opened the envelope absently, thinking it was a routine notice. It wasn't. The first line hit me before I even reached the second. We have received the request to review property ownership confirmation forms. My heart tightened. Property ownership. My home. The place I had built memories with my husband brick by brick year after year. The place where my son had taken his first steps. The place where every triumph, every argument, every quiet morning coffee had left its mark on the walls. I read the sentence again, slower this time, as if the meaning might change. We have received the request. Request? From who? I hadn't requested anything. A chill moved through me. Not fear exactly, but a warning. One of those deep, instinctual alerts that come from a place inside your bones. A place that knows danger long before the mind admits it. My hands trembled slightly as I continued reading. Please confirm that you authorize your representative to proceed with reviewing shared financial responsibilities related to the estate. Representative? Shared responsibilities? Estate. My husband and I had sorted everything carefully before he passed. Nothing was shared with anyone. No one had permission. No one had access. No one had the right to even ask. So why was the bank receiving requests? And more importantly, who was making them? I set the letter down slowly, like placing a fragile truth on the table. For a moment, the world felt silent. The refrigerator hummed in the distance. The clock on the wall ticked in steady, indifferent rhythm. Even the wind outside seemed to pause, as if waiting for my reaction. And that's when something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger. Anger comes hot and fast. This came cool and steady. A realization. A clarity I hadn't expected at all. My son wasn't careless. He wasn't distant. He wasn't simply forgetting to visit or call or care. No, something deliberate was happening. Something planned. And this letter, this piece of paper that was never meant to reach my hands, was the first crack in the facade. I pressed my fingertips against the table to steady myself, feeling the grain of the wood beneath my palms. This house had held me through grief, through joy, through decades. And now something or someone was trying to loosen my grip on it. That evening, I sat in my late husband's armchair, the letter resting in my lap. I stared at it for a long while, thinking of the quiet conversations I'd overheard, The strange tone in my son's voice, the calculated sympathy in Clara's eyes. None of it was random. None of it was harmless. Something was being moved behind my back. And in that moment I knew I couldn't stay silent. Not anymore. That's when I decided to make the first lawyer's call. But why would a bank receive a property authorization request under my name months before my son confronted me? And what did the first lawyer tell me during that secret call? Something that changed everything. The answers unfold in the next chapter. I stared at the phone for nearly an hour before dialing. It sat on the table in front of me. An ordinary object, harmless, familiar, but that evening it felt like a weight. A bridge I didn't want to cross. A confession I wasn't ready to make. Because calling a lawyer about your own child, feels like taking a knife to something sacred, like admitting that the world has shifted beneath your feet, and you can no longer pretend otherwise. But that letter was still in my lap. The words were still burning under my skin, and my instincts, those old stubborn motherly instincts, wouldn't let me stay silent. So I picked up the phone. My husband had once told me, when you don't know who to trust the person whose livelihood depends on the truth. He meant lawyers. He meant protection. He meant moments like this, though neither of us ever imagined our son would be the reason. The number wasn't chosen at random. It belonged to a man my husband had worked with years ago, a quiet, intelligent attorney named Mr. Alden. A man who didn't waste words, didn't soften truths, and didn't pretend to care when he didn't. Exactly who I needed. When his voice answered, calm, steady, professional, I nearly hung up. Not out of fear, but out of grief. Because once you speak something aloud, you can never take it back. Mr. Alden, this is Margaret Hale. He must have remembered me. His tone warmed almost instantly. Mrs. Hale, it's been a long time. How can I help you? The simplest question in the world. The hardest to answer. I swallowed slowly, my throat tight. I received a letter from the bank about authorization changes to my home. A pause. Soft. Measured. Did you request anything? He asked. No. Another pause, longer this time. Who would have access to even attempt that, Mrs. Hale? I looked at the letter again. The neatly printed text. The words that snuck into my life like thieves. My son, I whispered. Or his wife. I heard a slow breath on the other end, controlled but telling. Do you have reason to believe they're acting without your consent? The question hit harder than I expected. Reason? I had dozens. Tiny moments. Changes in tone. Unfinished sentences. Whispered conversations on my porch. Clara's gentle suggestions wrapped in silk but laced with iron. My son's sudden desire to help me manage things I had always handled alone. Yes, I finally said. I do. Mr. Alden didn't sugarcoat a thing. Mrs. Hale, at your age. I winced. He caught himself instantly. I don't mean physically. I mean legally. At your stage of life, people often try to move assets, properties, or accounts under the guise of support. Sometimes family. Sometimes spouses. Sometimes both. A short pause. Have they shown sudden interest in your estate? Sudden interest. What a gentle phrase for something so sharp. Yes, I whispered. They have. Mr. Alden's voice became firm, protective. Then you need to safeguard yourself immediately. I want you to bring that letter to my office tomorrow. Something inside me loosened. Another thing tightened. Is it serious? I asked. He didn't hesitate. If they are doing what I think they're doing, then yes. And it's only the beginning. I ended the call with trembling fingers, staring at the quiet phone as if it were now a witness. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear. Not grief. Not even betrayal. Resolve. I would not let anyone take the life I built. Not even the child I brought into this world. But what did Mr. Alden discover the next day when he examined the letter? Something even I wasn't prepared for. And why did he insist I hire not one lawyer but two? The next chapter reveals what really lay beneath the surface. When I stepped into Mr. Alden's office the next morning, the air felt different, thicker somehow, like the room itself knew something I didn't. The walls were lined with old legal books, their spines faded from years of sun and certainty. His desk was immaculate, not a paper out of place, not a pen turned the wrong way. I'd always believed a person's surroundings reveal more truth than their words. His office whispered precision, discipline, and most importantly, preparedness. He greeted me gently, but I saw the intensity beneath his calm. He didn't offer small talk. He didn't pretend this was routine. He simply gestured toward the chair across from his desk and reached for the envelope I carried. "Let's take a look," he said. His fingers moved with steady confidence as he unfolded the paper. The moment his eyes scanned the first line, his brows knit. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just a subtle tightening. But it was enough to make my pulse quicken. He read silently line after line, flipping the page, flipping it back again. Then he inhaled slowly through his nose, one of those breaths people take when they're choosing their words with surgical care. "Mrs. Hale," he began. That tone. I knew it from doctors' offices, from funeral homes, from places where truth hurts more than the wound. He placed the paper flat on the desk and looked at me with steady eyes. "This is not just a review request. This is a pre-authorization form." My hands tightened around the strap of my handbag. "What does that mean?" He tapped a fingertip against the line marked "Representative Access to Estate-Related Assets." "It means someone is trying to establish themselves as a legal decision-maker over your property. Someone is laying groundwork." Groundwork. It was a strange word. Soft in sound, heavy in meaning. "But they can't do that without my signature," I said. He nodded. "Correct. But they can prepare forms. They can initiate inquiries. They can file preliminary requests. And sometimes, with the right persuasion, institutions move faster than they should." A cold ripple traveled up my arms. "Is it my son?" I whispered. His silence answered before he did. "This document was prepared using your son's email address. And the forwarding address listed belongs to him and his wife." My breath caught. The betrayal I'd only sensed in shadows suddenly took shape right there on the paper. Bold, undeniable, inked with intention. Mr. Alden leaned forward. "Mrs. Hale, this was step 1. There will be a step 2. And 3. They're not guessing. They're executing a plan." My heartbeat pounded in my ears. A plan. My son. My only son. He let the silence settle before he continued. "I advise you to protect your estate immediately. You need oversight, protection, and someone to act swiftly when lines are crossed." I nodded weakly, though my mind struggled to keep pace. "And that's why," he said gently, "I told you on the phone that you need 2 lawyers." I blinked. "2? Why 2? "One to handle your estate," he said, tapping the letter, "and another to prepare for what your family may attempt if this accelerates." I stared at him, stunned. "You think this will escalate?" He didn't flinch. "Mrs. Hale, in my experience, when someone tries to seize control of a parent's home, they rarely stop at paperwork." The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if the truth had pushed its weight against the walls. He slid the letter back to me carefully, like he was returning a loaded gun. "You must stay ahead of them," he said softly. "Silent, steady, prepared. Do not confront your son. Do not mention this letter. Let them believe you are unaware." I swallowed hard. "Why?" His voice lowered. "Because people show their truest intentions when they think you're defenseless." The silence between us felt sharp. "And Mrs. Hale," he added, "whatever happens next, you are not alone." For the first time since my husband passed, I felt something close to safety. But it was laced with dread, because if 2 lawyers were necessary, then what my son was planning was far darker than I'd allowed myself to imagine. But what did the second lawyer discover? Something hidden not in bank papers, but in my son's recent actions. And how far had he already gone without me knowing? The next chapter uncovers a truth that shattered what little trust one had left. The second lawyer, Ms. Rowan, had a very different energy from Mr. Alden. Where he was steady and methodical, she was sharp, a quiet storm contained inside a neat navy suit. Her office smelled faintly of jasmine and old paper, a strange but comforting combination. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, not a strand out of place, as if even her appearance refused to tolerate disorder. She didn't smile when I walked in. She studied me, politely but with a perceptiveness that made me straighten my spine. "You must be Mrs. Hale," she said. "I've read the preliminary notes Mr. Alden sent. Please sit." There was no soft easing into conversation, no gentle build-up. She opened a folder, pulled out a printed record, and tapped it twice with the end of her pen. I want you to look at this. I leaned forward. The page was filled with lines of text, mostly numbers, small dates, things too formal to understand without context. But one detail stood out like a bruise. A financial consultation request filed under my name. But the signature wasn't mine. It wasn't even a good imitation. My breath caught. I never requested this, I said, my voice shrinking into the space between us. I know, she replied calmly. That's why you're here. Her eyes didn't soften. She wasn't comforting me. She was preparing me. When did this happen? I asked, pointing to the date. 3 weeks ago, she said. And it wasn't the only one. My stomach tightened. She slid forward another document. And another. And another. 3 requests. 3 attempts. Each one more invasive than the last. Each one stamped with a digital authorization tied to my son's home IP address. I stared at the stack, the weight of it pressing into me like a slow, suffocating truth. Why would he do this? I whispered. Ms. Rowan folded her hands. Because, Mrs. Hale, your estate is worth more than you realize. I blinked, stunned. It's just the house. Her look told me I was wrong. It's the house, she said. The land it stands on, the investments your husband left, and several accounts tied to your name that have not been dormant, as you may have believed, but accruing quietly. My throat tightened. But Stuart knows that. She sighed. Mrs. Hale, with access to your mail, your digital correspondences, and your past medical consultations, he knows a great deal more than he should. I felt my fingers go cold against the armrest. Medical consultations. The word hit me like a slap, sharp and unexpected. What do my medical consultations have to do with anything? I asked slowly. Her eyes flickered in that way professionals do when they're about to reveal something unpleasant. He requested a review of your cognitive assessments. The room tilted again, just like in Mr. Alden's office. My what? Your cognitive evaluations, she repeated gently. There was a request to determine if you were fit to manage your own financial affairs. I froze. Every nerve in me stiffened, as if my body itself was refusing to accept the meaning behind her words. He thinks I'm incapable? He thinks I can't think, can't manage, can't understand? My own son? Or worse, he wants others to think it. Ms. Rowan leaned forward. Mrs. Hale, this is often step 2 in estate manipulation cases. If someone establishes the suggestion of diminished capacity, courts become more flexible toward transferring authority. Tears rose, hot and unwelcome. But I'm fine, I whispered. I'm completely fine. She nodded. I know, but they don't need you to be unwell. They only need a paper trail that suggests the question. My lungs felt tight, as if the air in the room had thickened. I thought of the whispers on my porch, the sudden concern, the gentle suggestions, the soft tones, the folder on my table. It all connected. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't age. It was a plan. And it had started long before that morning in my kitchen. Ms. Rowan tapped her pen, her voice steady but urgent. You must remain quiet. Do not confront him. Do not warn them. We need to see how far they're willing to go. The silence in the office felt like a held breath. Hers, mine, the world's. And in that silence, something inside me cracked. Not in fragility, but in awakening. My son wasn't just drifting away from me. He was preparing life without me. But what had my son already set in motion behind my back? Something even the lawyers didn't anticipate. And why did an unexpected visitor arrive at my door just days later, confirming the worst? The next chapter uncovers the moment everything clicked into place. 3 days passed after my meeting with Ms. Rowan, each one stretched thin with unease. Not fear, fear has a sharpness to it. This was something duller, heavier, like carrying a stone in my chest that wouldn't shift no matter how I breathed. I moved through the days like someone trying not to disturb dust. Quietly, carefully, watching my phone every time it buzzed, flinching each time footsteps passed near my porch. I knew something more was coming. Trouble doesn't arrive politely. It circles you for a while first, then knocks only when it knows you're alone. And on the 4th morning it knocked. It was around 10 a.m. when I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, pressing into the old wooden boards outside my door. The kind of footsteps belonging to someone who believes they have a right to be wherever they choose. I wiped my hands on my apron and approached the door cautiously. Through the small window beside the frame, I saw a man, middle-aged, neatly dressed, clipboard in hand. His car, a dark sedan with no visible company markings, idled quietly in my driveway. A prickle crawled up my spine. I opened the door just enough to see him clearly. "Good morning," he said, offering a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Hale?" "Yes," I replied, gripping the door a little tighter. "My name is Daniel Reed. I'm here for the home evaluation." "Home evaluation?" My stomach dropped. "I didn't request any evaluation," I said sharply. "Oh," he replied lightly, as if this happened all the time. "Your representative scheduled it. Your son." The stone in my chest grew heavier. "My what?" "Your son," he repeated, flipping a page on his clipboard. "Mr. Stuart Hale. He filed the request last week. Says you're preparing to transition into assisted living and need the home appraised." The world around me went quiet. Assisted living. As if I were already being packed away. As if my life belonged in a smaller space, a controlled space. A place where decisions weren't mine anymore. I steadied myself against the door frame. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice thin but firm. "I have made no such decision." He tilted his head sympathetically, the way people do before delivering unpleasant news. "Well, ma'am, according to his documents, the transition is already under review. My job is just to assess the property's value." Assess. Value. Transition. 3 words that felt like hands tightening around my throat. Mr. Reed glanced over my shoulder, peeking into my home as if inventorying everything at a glance. My husband's old photographs, the worn rug he used to stand on while shaving, the windows we'd chosen together decades ago. "Shall we begin?" he asked. "No," I said immediately. He blinked, thrown off. "No," he echoed. "No." This time my voice didn't shake. "I am not transitioning anywhere. And no one is appraising this home without my consent." For a moment he looked almost uncomfortable. Then his professionalism returned, smoothing over his expression like a curtain pulled across a stage. "I'll make a note of your refusal," he said. "But you should speak with your son. He was very clear about your situation." My situation. The words almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I closed the door, slowly, firmly, deliberately, until the latch clicked with a finality I felt in my bones. Through the window, I watched him walk back to his car, scribbling on his clipboard with quick, almost irritated strokes. He didn't look back once, as if I were merely a task gone inconvenient. When his car pulled out of the driveway, I stood still for a long time, staring at the empty space he left behind. That was no random evaluation. That was step 3. And now I knew. Whatever my son was planning, he had already placed the pieces on the board. The lawyers were right. This wasn't drifting. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was intent. And intent, when left unchecked, becomes action. I walked back into my kitchen, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for my phone. Because now more than ever I needed help. And I needed it fast. But what had Stuart already signed? Something I wouldn't discover until days later. That showed he was far more committed to his plan than I ever imagined. And what role did Clara play in pushing it forward? The next chapter exposes a betrayal carved in quiet ink. The incident with the evaluator should have broken me. Should have sent me spiraling into panic or denial. But strangely, it didn't. Instead, it cleared the fog. All the small doubts, the quiet moments, the whispered suspicions blended into a single sharp truth. My son had already crossed a line. Not by accident. Not out of confusion. But by choice. Still, even knowing that, nothing prepared me for what came next. 3 days after the evaluator's visit, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. A thin cream-colored one. The kind used for official matters, legal notices, things that change lives quietly. My name was printed neatly across the front. Not handwritten. Printed. Cold. Impersonal. I stood on my porch for a long time before opening it. The wind rustled the trees, brushing dry leaves across my driveway like tiny whispers rushing past my feet. Inside was a copy of a document, one that froze the breath in my chest. A preliminary care directive. Filed, submitted, and digitally signed. By my son. And by Clara. Not witnessed by me. Not discussed with me. Not even hinted at. But submitted as though I had already agreed. A clause in the document stood out in bold. Subject is preparing for assisted living transition pending medical review. Subject. Not mother. Not Margaret. Not a human being with autonomy. Subject. As if my entire existence had been reduced to a file header. My hands trembled as I turned the page. The directive listed assets, responsibilities, authority transfer procedures. It positioned Stuart as primary decision-maker and Clara as secondary authority. They had signatures beside their names, full, firm, confident strokes. The third signature line, mine, was blank. But the submission date had already passed. My vision blurred. Not with tears, those came later. But with a kind of disbelief that wraps around the heart like ice. They were planning my transition. My care. My home. My life. Without me. I sat down on the porch steps, clutching the pages to my chest. A memory flickered. Stuart as a boy, running down this same driveway, scraped knees, dirty elbows, tears streaming after falling from his bicycle. I'd lifted him, dusted him off, kissed away the pain. How does a child who once needed your arms grow into a man who signs away your independence? I pressed the directive against my knee, forcing my hands to steady. Slowly, the hurt curled into something else. Not anger, not yet, but resolve. Quiet, older kind of strength. I called Ms. Rowan immediately. My voice shook as I explained the document, the signatures, the submission. She didn't sound surprised. That frightened me more than the papers. "Mrs. Hale," she said gently, "this confirms our suspicion. They're building a paper trail. They want control established before you realize what's happening." "But why?" I whispered, my throat tight. There was a moment of silence on her end. Heavy, thoughtful. "Because they've already planned their next move," she finally said. "And they can only make that move once they prove you're no longer capable." I felt the world tilt again. "They want to prove I'm incompetent?" I asked. "No," she said carefully. "They want to create the appearance of it. And once enough documents exist, perception can become evidence." A slow dread seeped through me. Every knock at the door. Every unexpected visitor. Every concerned question from Clara. Every gentle suggestion from my son. It was all groundwork. But what was the final goal? The end game? What were they preparing for? I didn't ask Ms. Rowan. I didn't need to. Some part of me already knew the answer before she spoke. "Mrs. Hale," she said softly, "Stuart is preparing to claim full legal guardianship." Guardianship. Over me. His mother. My breath left my lungs in a single broken exhale. She continued, voice steady but urgent. "And if they succeed, you will lose control of your home, your finances, and your decisions. Everything." The papers in my hands fluttered in the breeze, like fragile pieces of a life someone was trying to fold away. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not quietly. Not blindly. Not willingly. I looked at the signature lines again, my resolve hardening. If they thought age made me weak, they had forgotten one thing. Age also makes you dangerous. Because you've survived too much to surrender easily. But how far were they willing to go to secure guardianship? And what shocking conversation did I overhear? One that revealed Clara's true intentions and shattered every illusion I had left. The truth surfaces in the next chapter. Some truths don't arrive loudly. They don't burst through doors or strike like lightning. They slip in quietly, through walls too thin, windows cracked open, and hearts worn down by trust. Mine arrived on a soft, windy evening when the sky hung low and gray, like it was tired of holding its own weight. I had just returned from the store, a small bag of groceries in hand, when I saw Stuart's car parked crookedly along the curb. Clara's was beside it. My first thought was naive, almost foolish. Maybe they came to talk. Maybe they came to apologize, explain, soften. Maybe the son I raised still existed somewhere beneath all the paperwork and careful lies. But when I noticed the way the curtains in my living room shifted slightly, just a whisper, I froze. They were inside, uninvited, unannounced, discussing something they didn't mean for me to hear. I set the grocery bag down silently on the porch and stepped closer to the window. My heart thudded in my chest. Not with fear, but with something sharper, something that felt like the truth clawing its way up my throat. Clara's voice came first. "I'm telling you, Stuart, the sooner we get this done, the better. Your mother is unpredictable. What if she changes accounts? What if she moves money? We can't risk delays." Unpredictable. As if I were volatile. A child. A burden. Stuart's reply was lower, strained. "I know, Clara. But I don't want to force her." "Force me." He said the word like it was a distasteful medicine he didn't want to taste. Clara scoffed softly. I could almost see the dramatic roll of her eyes. "She won't know it's being forced. That's the point. Once the guardianship review is filed, the court will decide. Not her." My breath caught. Guardianship review. Filed. Soon. Not a possibility. A plan. I pressed my fingertips against the window frame, grounding myself. The wood felt cold, like it understood. Stuart sighed heavily. She's my mother, Clara." "And?" Clara snapped. "You think love pays for homes? For tuition? For the baby? For the life we're trying to build? You've been stuck in that house your whole life. It's time to grow up and take responsibility." A baby. A life they were building. Pieces clicked together in my mind like falling dominoes. This wasn't about me being incapable. This wasn't concern. This wasn't protection. It was money, future, stability, security, and I was the currency. "You don't understand," Stuart said weakly. "She won't sign anything." Clara lowered her voice then. Not soft, not gentle, but dangerous. "She doesn't have to. That's why the medical review request matters. Once the evaluation is done, she'll have no legal standing to refuse. Everything will fall into place. We're so close." My heart pounded so loudly I was afraid they might hear it. Medical review. Evaluation. The subtle questions Clara had asked for months. The sudden insistence I rest more. The remarks about my forgetfulness I never had. They were manufacturing incompetence. One careful thread at a time. Stuart murmured something I couldn't hear. Clara's response sliced the air like steel. "Do not back down now. You already filed the preliminary directive. The evaluator came. The paperwork is in motion. If you hesitate, it will all fall apart. And then what? We struggle for years while your mother sits on a house she doesn't need." My breath shook. My home. My memories. My life. Reduced to an obstacle in someone else's plan. Stuart didn't answer immediately. I heard footsteps, his. Slow, heavy, conflicted. Then his voice, tired, defeated. "Fine. File it next week." My knees buckled slightly, and I gripped the edge of the porch railing to steady myself. File it next week. The words echoed like a countdown. 7 days. Until everything I owned, everything I was, became something the court would dissect. 7 days until the plan they built behind my back became irreversible. I stepped away from the window, heartbreaking, bleeding in quiet, unseen ways. Not because of the betrayal itself, but because of the soft tremor in my son's voice. The tremor of a man who knew he was doing wrong and did it anyway. I picked up the grocery bag with trembling hands. The eggs inside rattled softly, fragile things holding themselves together better than I was. When I walked into the house, I didn't confront them, didn't shout, didn't crumble. I simply listened to the sound of their footsteps fading out my front door. I would not stop them. Not yet. Because now, I finally understood the entire shape of their plan. And that meant I could dismantle it. Piece by piece. But what strategy did my lawyers devise? A plan so precise, so quietly powerful, that it turned the tables without my son realizing he was walking straight into it. And what unexpected allies stepped forward when I needed them most? The turning point begins in the next chapter. The night after overhearing Stuart and Clara's conversation, sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, the words replayed, cold, sharp, echoing through the stillness of my home. File it next week. Your mother is unpredictable. She doesn't have to sign. By dawn, I knew something had changed inside me. Not hardening, no. Hardness is brittle. This was something else. Something steadier. Resolve. If they thought I would crumble quietly, they had forgotten who raised Stuart, who survived losing a husband, who kept this home alive through years of storms, outside and inside. At exactly 9 a.m., I dialed Ms. Rowan. She answered on the first ring, almost as if she had been expecting me. "Mrs. Hale," she said gently, "are you all right?" "No," I replied softly, "but I will be. And we need to talk." She didn't waste time. "Come in." Immediately. Ms. Rowan and Mr. Alden were already seated together when I arrived, two different worlds of expertise, united by one common goal: protecting me. They listened quietly as I described every detail of the conversation I'd overheard. Clara's words, Stuart's hesitation, the filing timeline, the mention of a medical review. When I finished, the room fell into a heavy silence. Mr. Alden leaned back, exhaling slowly through his nose. "This confirms it. They're moving toward guardianship." Ms. Rowan nodded. "And fast." My voice wavered. "What can we do? I only have a few days." A spark flickered in Ms. Rowan's eyes, sharp, controlled, confident. "That's enough," she said. "More than enough, actually." She reached for a folder, thick with documents, and placed it gently in front of me. "This," she said, tapping the cover, "is our strategy." I felt the air shift, like the soft stirring before a storm breaks. She opened the folder. "First," she explained, "you will undergo your own medical evaluation. Our evaluation. Independent. Certified. Thorough. Done before they make any move." "But my health is fine," I said. She smiled slightly. "Exactly. And that's the point." Her pen tapped softly against the table. "With a clean current evaluation, their entire case collapses. Courts look for patterns, not isolated concerns. We'll establish the truth before they create their fiction." I breathed out slowly, relief mixing with a new understanding. I wasn't powerless. I just needed the right weapons. Mr. Alden took over. "Next," he said, lifting a second document, "we secure your estate under a protective trust you control fully. Every major asset, your home, your accounts, your investments, gets placed under legal protection." I blinked. "Will that stop them?" "It will do more than stop them," he replied with quiet certainty. "It will render their efforts meaningless. Even under guardianship, a court cannot override a properly structured trust established while you were of sound mind." Sound mind. The phrase hit me with unexpected emotion. "That means," I whispered, "they can't touch anything?" "Not a penny," he said. "Not a brick of your house." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that sink in. "And last," Ms. Rowan added, "you will not tell them anything. Not a warning. Not a hint." Her voice held a gravity that made me straighten. "Their entire case depends on you appearing unaware and vulnerable. Let them believe you are walking straight into their plan. Let them file. Let them think they are winning." Her eyes flashed. "And then we reveal everything, with legal documentation already in place." For the first time in weeks, I felt something warm spread through my chest. Hope. Not the fragile kind. The solid kind. The kind built from truth and preparation and strength rediscovered. I nodded slowly. "I'll do exactly what you say." Ms. Rowan smiled. "Good. Because you're not fighting this alone." As we were finalizing the details, Mr. Alden cleared his throat gently. "There's something else," he said. "Someone reached out to us this morning. Someone who might help your case more than you expect." I frowned. "Who?" He exchanged a brief glance with Ms. Rowan before answering. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Carter." I blinked in surprise. "Ellen." "Yes," he said. "She contacted our office with concerns about your son's recent behavior. Things she has witnessed, conversations she has overheard, visits she found suspicious." A swell of emotion rose in my chest. Unexpected. Overwhelming. Someone had noticed. Someone cared. Someone saw what I felt but couldn't prove. "She wants to help," Ms. Rowan added. "And her testimony could become crucial." I pressed a hand to my heart, breathing through the tidal wave of gratitude and hurt mixing inside me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel alone. But what exactly did Mrs. Carter witness? Something far darker than I ever imagined, that shifted the entire case in our favor. And how did it expose Clara's true nature in ways even my lawyers didn't predict? The revelations unfold in the next chapter. When Mr. Alden told me that Mrs. Carter, My quiet, soft-spoken neighbor had stepped forward. I couldn't hide my shock. Ellen Carter had lived beside me for nearly 20 years. She was the type of woman who baked cookies for holidays, trimmed her roses with delicate gloves, and waved politely from her porch swing. Never intrusive, never overbearing. I never imagined she had seen anything. But the very next morning, she called and asked if I could come over for tea. Her voice trembled, not from age but from something heavier. When I stepped into her living room, a soft smell of lavender wrapped around me. She motioned for me to sit, her hands shaking as she poured tea into delicate porcelain cups. "I don't know how to say this," she began, "but I should have spoken sooner." I reached across the table, my hand brushing hers gently. "It's all right, Ellen. Just tell me." She inhaled shakily. "I've seen things, heard things, things that didn't seem right. At first I thought they were personal family matters, and I had no right to interfere. But now, after hearing what I heard yesterday, I can't stay silent." "Yesterday?" I asked. She nodded, folding her hands tightly in her lap. "Clara was on your porch. She didn't know I was gardening at the side of the house. And she was angry. Furious, actually." A cold shiver crept up my spine. Mrs. Carter continued, choosing her words carefully. She was pacing back and forth, talking on the phone. And she said things that made my stomach turn. My pulse quickened. "What did she say, Ellen?" She swallowed, her voice lowering. She said, "If this old woman doesn't cooperate soon, we'll have to push harder. Stuart is too soft." "I'll handle it." My breath hitched. Push harder. Handle it. Old woman. Words meant to intimidate. Words laced with cruelty. Words that revealed a truth I didn't want to face. But Mrs. Carter wasn't done. "That wasn't all," she added softly. "A week ago, I saw your son on your porch too. He didn't notice me. He had your mail in his hands, your letters, your bills, and he was going through them." The cup in my hands rattled slightly. "Going through my mail?" I whispered. She nodded. He opened one envelope, looked at the papers, then tore something out and left the rest. It looked like he was removing things. My heart pounded painfully, because suddenly so many little mysteries made sense. Letters I expected but never received. Statements that arrived incomplete. The missing forms I assumed I had misplaced. The delay Mr. Alden mentioned in one of my account updates. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't a clerical error. It wasn't age. It was him. And Clara. Steady. Careful. Removing pieces of my life like threads from a tapestry, hoping I wouldn't notice until it all unraveled. But there was one more thing. Something in Mrs. Carter's eyes told me she wasn't finished. "What else, Ellen?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She exhaled, her voice trembling. "The worst part was what I overheard between Clara and that man who came for the house evaluation." My stomach tightened. "You overheard them talking?" I asked. "Yes," she whispered. "They met around the side of the house, thinking no one was home. Clara told him very directly to make sure the report reflected signs of neglect and deteriorating upkeep." I froze. "She was trying to make your home look unsafe," she continued, "so that the transition to assisted living would seem necessary." A heavy silence fell between us. Clara wasn't just manipulating paperwork. She was manufacturing evidence, building a case that painted me as unable to maintain my home, unable to care for myself. "She even gave him something," Ellen whispered. "An envelope. I don't know what was inside." "A bribe." The word formed in my mind with sickening clarity. I leaned back in my chair, my chest tight, my breath shaky. For weeks I'd sensed danger, manipulation, deceit, but now it was no longer invisible. It was real, tangible, documented, witnessed. And the worst part wasn't Clara's cruelty. It was Stuart's silence. He knew. He saw. He allowed it. Maybe he even approved. Mrs. Carter placed a gentle hand over mine. "I'm so sorry, Margaret. You didn't deserve any of this. And I will testify to every word I heard. You're not going to face this alone." For a moment my vision blurred. Not from fear this time, but from the unexpected comfort of knowing someone truly cared. Someone saw me. Someone believed me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Ellen. More than you know." But inside, a new question formed, heavy and terrifying. If Clara was willing to bribe evaluators and push medical lies, what was she planning next? And what I discovered just days later, a medical appointment I never scheduled, at a clinic I'd never visited, proved that Clara's ambitions went far deeper than guardianship. She wasn't just after my home. She was after my identity. The truth unravels in the next chapter. I wasn't expecting a call that morning. Not from an unfamiliar number. Not with the crisp, professional tone of a receptionist who sounded like she'd said the same words 100 times already. Hello, may I speak with Margaret Hale? This is Northwood Medical Associates calling to confirm your cognitive evaluation appointment for tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. For a moment, the world around me went utterly silent. Cognitive evaluation. Appointment. Tomorrow. I gripped the phone tighter, my breath lodged somewhere between my chest and throat. I didn't schedule any appointment, I said eventually, doing my best to keep my voice steady. The woman hesitated. Ma'am, your representative did. There it was, that word again. Representative. The word they were using to steal my autonomy. I swallowed, my pulse thudding heavily. Who is listed as my representative? I asked. Paper rustled on the other end of the call. It says here, Stuart Hale. My stomach dropped. Suddenly I felt weak, no, not weak, shaken. In a way that seeped into my bones. Not only were they building a legal case, not only were they manipulating evaluators, not only were they filing directives behind my back, they were now trying to force medical documentation that could declare me unfit. I won't be attending, I said firmly. The receptionist sounded confused. Ma'am, the appointment is already prepaid and marked as mandatory by your representative. Mandatory. The way she said it made my skin crawl. I took a slow breath, forcing steel into my voice. I am canceling this appointment. I am fully capable of managing my own health. Another pause. Ma'am, the cancellation must be requested by your representative. For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. My chest felt hollow. They had set the trap so carefully, so quietly, that even canceling a fraudulent appointment required their consent. I thanked the woman, ended the call gently, and placed the phone on the table with trembling hands. Then I just sat. For a long time I didn't move. I stared at the wooden grains of my kitchen table. The same table where my husband and I shared meals, whispered memories, grieved losses, celebrated small victories. The same table where Stuart used to build Lego towers and proudly show me every awkward creation he made. How did we get here? Where was the boy who once hugged me with sticky fingers and whispered, Mom, you're my favorite person in the world. Now I was a burden, a stepping stone, a financial opportunity, a signature waiting to be forged, an identity waiting to be rewritten. When I finally rose to call Ms. Rowan, my legs felt unsteady, like they were relearning how to hold me up. She answered immediately. Mrs. Hale. Her tone sharpened the moment she heard my breathing. I just received a call, I whispered. A medical evaluation appointment. One I didn't make. How soon? She asked. Tomorrow. She cursed under her breath. Quiet, controlled, but unmistakably angry. This means they're accelerating, she said. They're pushing for medical evidence before filing the guardianship petition. If they obtain even a partial evaluation, they'll present it as early proof. My voice cracked. What do? We respond, Ms. Rowan said. Hard and fast. Within an hour, she and Mr. Alden were at my home. Documents. Instructions. Protective measures. Every possible counteraction laid out with precision. As we went through the paperwork, Mr. Alden paused, brow furrowing. Mrs. Hale, when was the last time you checked your online medical portal? I don't use it often, I admitted. He exchanged a look with Ms. Rowan, one that carried tension. Let's check it now, she said softly. I logged in with shaky hands. What I saw made my heart lurch. A medical history update had been added under my name 2 weeks ago. A note describing memory inconsistencies, confusion during routine tasks, and general cognitive concern raised by family member. My breath froze. I never saw this, I whispered. You weren't meant to, Ms. Rowan said darkly. This is step 4. Establishing the narrative in your medical file, so the court believes there's a pattern. I stared at the screen, at the blatant lies typed in clinical, emotionless language. Someone had altered my identity on paper. Someone was rewriting me. Not as a mother, a widow, a capable woman, but as a fragile, declining shadow of myself. A version of me that didn't exist. Tears stung my eyes, not from fear but from something deeper. Something like grief. Grief for the relationship I once thought I had. Grief for the son I believed would protect me. Grief for the trust that was now shattered beyond recognition. Ms. Rowan placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "We're going to stop this," she said quietly. "But you must brace yourself, Mrs. Hale, because if they're willing to alter medical records..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I already understood. They were willing to do anything. But just when I thought the worst had been uncovered, we found a hidden financial transfer. An account moved without my knowledge into a name I didn't recognize. And the person behind that name revealed the darkest truth yet. The next chapter exposes everything. The morning everything came full circle began quietly, too quietly. A stillness hung over my home, the kind that settles before something breaks open. By then, Ms. Rowan and Mr. Alden had gathered every piece of evidence we needed. Mrs. Carter had signed her statement. My independent medical evaluation was complete. Clean, flawless, undeniable. The protective trust was finalized. All that remained was one final step. The financial audit. Mr. Alden had insisted on it, sensing something deeper woven through the mess, something hidden beneath the paperwork, the manipulation, the lies. He arrived at my home that morning with a laptop tucked under his arm and a look on his face I had only seen once before, when he first read the suspicious letter that started everything. "Mrs. Hale," he said gently as he sat at my dining table, "I believe we've found the missing piece." He opened a document. First I saw only numbers, transfers, dates, account IDs, but then one name appeared. A name I didn't recognize. Marianne Watts. I frowned. "Who is that?" Mr. Alden inhaled slowly. "That is the name your son used to move one of your accounts." My heart stuttered. "What? Move an account? Into a stranger's name? Into a shared account?" He corrected softly. "One he and Clara control." I stared at him, stunned into silence. Stuart had already taken money. Not planning to. Not preparing to. He had already done it. And he used a fake identity to do it. My hands trembled on the table. Why that name? Mr. Alden clicked on a second file. An image opened. A birth certificate. A hospital record. And then it hit me. Hard enough to steal my breath. Marianne Watts was Clara's mother. Deceased for 5 years. They used her identity to move my money. It wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. Exploitation. A crime. As the truth sank in, tears blurred my vision. Not because of the money. Not because of the crime. But because my son, my only son, had allowed it. He had stood beside Clara. He had watched. He had participated. He had chosen this path. And that was the deepest wound of all. Mr. Alden closed the laptop gently. "This is enough to shut down their petition entirely," he said. "And more than enough to protect you permanently." I looked at the screen again, my heart aching. Not from weakness, but from the weight of a truth I could no longer run from. But before we could proceed, before the paperwork could be finalized, before the guardianship petition could be crushed, they arrived. Stuart and Clara. Unannounced. Walking straight into the home they were so confident would soon be theirs. Clara entered first, expression tight, voice clipped. "Mother, we need to talk. The appointment is tomorrow and..." She stopped abruptly when she saw Mr. Alden and Ms. Rowan seated at my dining table. Stuart's face paled. Clara's eyes narrowed. "Why are they here?" she demanded. I stood slowly, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. "They're here," I said softly, "because I know everything." For the first time, genuine fear flickered in Clara's eyes. Stuart swallowed hard. "Mom." I held up a hand, stopping him. "No more lies." I turned the laptop toward them, the financial record glowing on the screen. "Who is Marianne Watts?" I asked quietly. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. Clara's jaw tightened. Stuart looked away. Neither spoke a mess. Rowan rose from her seat. Mrs. Hale's assets are now fully protected under a trust, she said. Her medical evaluation has cleared her completely, and we have documented evidence of medical manipulation, mail tampering, and financial fraud. Clara's face twisted. You can't prove any. We can, Mr. Alden said calmly. And we have. Stuart's voice finally broke, trembling. Mom, I didn't think. I looked at him, really looked, and my heart cracked one last time. Stuart, I whispered, you let her change who I am. On paper. In her words. In your actions. He blinked rapidly, tears gathering. I just wanted to make things easier, he said. For us. For the baby. Clara said. There it is, I said softly. Clara said. He flinched. I raised you to stand on your own feet, not to lean on someone else's greed. Clara stepped forward. We were only trying to. No, I said sharply, surprising even myself with the strength in my voice. You were trying to erase me. The room went still. I took a breath, a deep, steady, liberating breath. This ends now. Ms. Rowan handed them a formal notice. This document states that any further attempts to interfere with Mrs. Hale's finances, medical records, or home will result in legal action. Criminal charges included. Clara snatched the paper, her mask cracking. You'll regret this, she hissed. I met her gaze calmly. No, Clara. The only regret here is yours. She stormed out. Stuart remained frozen for a moment, then followed her, shoulders shaking. The door closed behind them with a soft, hollow thud, and suddenly the house felt lighter, quieter, safer. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted my kitchen golden, I stood in the very spot where the story began, the counter where the envelope had once sat, the place where the first shadow of betrayal entered my home, the hook scene that opened this journey. That quiet morning, that envelope on my table, finally made perfect sense. It wasn't just a letter. It was a warning, a crack in the surface revealing an entire world beneath it, a world of secrets, lies, and choices that nearly cost me everything. But I was still here, still standing, still myself, and for the first time in months, I felt something powerful bloom in my chest. Freedom, not from danger, not from fear, but from the weight of a battle I didn't choose, and ultimately didn't lose. Months passed. The guardianship petition was withdrawn before it even reached a courtroom. Clara and Stuart moved to another town. They never tried to contact me again. Mrs. Carter became one of my closest friends. We shared tea on quiet afternoons. Two women who understood the strength it takes to stand up for yourself when the world expects you to be small. And as for me, I began living again. Not cautiously, not quietly, but fully. I tended my garden. I rebuilt my routines. I learned to trust my instincts again. And most importantly, I learned that age doesn't make you invisible. It makes you powerful, because you've survived enough to know what matters, and brave enough to protect it. If this story touched you, share it, save it, or leave a comment so more women can remember their worth.